Why is it that when a child is sexually abused and they grow up as an adult, they're allowed to still talk about the effects of that abuse? People will still circle around them and say how unfair it was. And it's okay. I understand why you have the trauma. Yet when a parent divorces a child, that child is supposed to get over it. We give a lot of grace to one situation and not the other, perhaps because everyone knows sexual abuse so far is bad. But we've come to think that divorce is not so bad. It's actually just a thing people do. I want to read even more out of Layla Miller's book, Primal Loss, and Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak, because I need you to understand, especially if you're considering divorce, your children will not heal. A wound cannot heal that remains open. Just keeps pussing and pussing, you wipe the pus away. When asked about children being resilient, this is what some adult children of divorce said. Person number 6. No, children say what they think you want to hear because when they don't get you full time, they want your attention. They could possibly hide their pain until they find an outlet, no matter if that outlet is 10 years later in the form of sex, alcohol, drugs, or worse. You can never just assume. Kids have it written on their hearts what a good and holy family is supposed to look like. And when you get a divorce, you just scribbled all over the perfect picture. You just can't erase that with some new paper and crayons. Person 21 says, before I say anything to my parents, can I slap them around a little bit first and let them know that it makes me happy so that they should be happy too? Okay, now you get it. So when people say stuff like that, it just makes me think that they say, see, and think what they want to say, see, and think, rather than observing reality. It is so terribly easy to manipulate kids, to make them pay the price for the sins of those who should love, protect, nurture, and care for them. I don't think I'm unusual. And I've thought often when reading surveys that say how great kids of divorce turn out, that by such a survey, I would look great too. For example, I've never gotten in trouble with drugs or alcohol. I did well in college and law school, had a fancy career until I left it. I have a good marriage and lovely kids. But the successes of school and career were in part because I felt the pressure to have it all together, since the rest of my life was so unstable. I think it's probably common for kids of divorce to create their own stability, which then reinforces the fact that they cannot trust others to care for them as they should. I hid my own pain for years. I'm still trying to figure out who I am and trying to believe that who I am is okay. I know my issues aren't due only to the divorce. Really? A divorce is at least sometimes just another indication of parents who put their own desires ahead of what is right for the kids. Another person, number 60, writes, I'd call it a load of crap. And I wouldn't wish that suffering on any child because just because children of divorce may seem fine, it doesn't mean that they are. They probably just don't want to talk about or think about it. I would cry myself to sleep or cry alone for hours. Guys, there are so many stories in here. In this chapter about speaking to your parents then and now, what would you say to your parents? One person writes, I have told my parents how I feel and how it has affected me and my siblings. I went over it all with my mother, her perceived need to divorce my father, and she knows the damage that it caused. There's no desire for revenge, but navigating through the detritus gets exhausting, and the barrier to just trust is still there and probably always will be. The result is a lack of confidence in my mother's judgment, and with it comes a lack of respect. Although I know my mother understands and tried to teach us the virtues of strength, sacrifice, and honor, it was all swept away with her decision. Here's the last one that I'm going to read. Person 69. He or she writes, Dear parents, there was never any justification for how you behaved in your separation and divorce from each other. I learned how not to behave by watching you. I learned how not to make decisions by watching yours. As a child, I had a different vantage point, but as an adult, I see things very clearly. You each have a vantage point, and each vantage point is in defense of yourself, and in the most selfish way. Your actions and words were not in defense of your marriage, and that was where you failed. When that stopped being your priority, I am a living, breathing piece of both of you. And I understand you both on a genetic level that you will never have perspective to understand. Hear me when I say this. You could have saved your marriage had you put effort into the right decisions. You chose to model dysfunction, and though I have become inured to that, it's not to my benefit now. It never has been, and it never will be. Your efforts to garner support for your dysfunctional logic and actions are empty and sad. I will never agree that the parents who created me should be separate from each other. No matter how terrible you are to each other or what justification you tell yourself in order to sleep at night, I will never take a side. The reason the unrest persists in each of you is because you've made the wrong decision. My existence is proof of the sacrament that you undertook. I'm a walking, breathing reminder of the vow you made to each other. You can ignore your promises to each other, but you can't ignore my existence as easily. How can a child forgive her parents for breaking their home? I forgive you anyway. How can a child be doubled with burden at every milestone and holiday because of your decision to separate from each other? I carry the burden anyway. How can a child learn how to be a functional adult who values marriage and models good decision-making of her own romantic love relationships? I persist in trying anyway. I do this for myself, to model the behavior and actions that you chose not to provide for me. And I endeavor to carry none of the animosity you taught me, because the weight of it is useless in my pursuit of heaven. You have failed me by destroying my family for selfish gain, while lying that it was for my benefit. I love you anyway. Make amends with God if you care about me. Better yet, do it for each other or yourselves. Otherwise, know that I will always want better for you than you have chosen for yourselves and each other. This came up because I talked to a young woman recently whose young adult child is dealing with terrible anger. And when I brought up the fact that she was divorced and this child wasn't angry before the divorce, she rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, you still think the divorce is bothering this now adult child?" And I said, "When did the wound heal? When did it heal? All he's learned to do is live with the pain. And anger is a secondary emotion. It comes out when there's a pain, an emotion that they can't express. Divorce is one of the greatest causes of that primary emotion, those primary emotions. Those children will have to learn to process those emotions. And how can they if you haven't learned to process yours and forgive and communicate and let the child talk about their pain to you? You don't want to hear them talk about their pain. Why? Because it hurts you? Is it better for them to hurt than you? Ponder that. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching another informational Bacon Bit. And no matter how sad things sound, continue to live your life sunny side up.